Fred. The Definitive Biography of Fred Dibnah by David Hall. Read by Clive Mantle. Introduction. Fred Dibnah, steeplejack, steam enthusiast, television presenter, was many things to many people, but you'd be hard-pushed to find anyone who didn't admire his commitment to Britain's industrial heritage. He longed to tell everybody who cared to listen how things were built and how they worked. Over a period of 7 years, from early 1998 until his untimely death from cancer in November 2004, I made more than 40 programmes for the BBC with Fred. During this time he became much more than a presenter of our programmes. He was a good friend, whom I would see throughout the year, not just in the months when we were filming. Fred and I hit it off from the first time we met. We came from the same working-class background in the northwest and grew up when places like Bolton and Manchester, where I was from, were still alive with manufacturing industry. I never really understood how Fred's engines worked, but we shared the same passion for telling the stories of the engineers whose skill and inventiveness made them possible, and recounting our history from the point of view of the builders and engineers and the ordinary working men who helped to make it. For 7 years, Fred and I spent every summer travelling the length and breadth of Britain, visiting magnificent castles and cathedrals, climbing to the top of great bridges like the Forth and the Humber, searching out steam-powered mill engines and pit-winding engines, tunnelling beneath the earth in coal mines, and tracing the routes of long-forgotten canals. For Fred, it was all a holiday paid for by the BBC, taking him to all these wonderful places that he wanted to go to. It was in that spirit that we made the programmes, so that his enthusiasm and sense of fun were never diminished. But filming with Fred wasn't without its dangers. Climbing to the top of the dome of St Paul's with him wasn't a problem, but driving was. As we sped along the motorways, I'd often struggle to keep going in a straight line as Fred would dig my arm to point out a chimney. Wherever we went, we'd always go for a drink together at the end of the day, and I've lost count of the number of lock-ins we had as the pints were lined up on the bar while Fred chatted with his many fans. Fred was already a well-established television personality long before I met him. Through the wonderful films of Don Howarth that chronicled Fred's life as steeplejack and steam enthusiast and his marital ups and downs, he had become what many people described as a national treasure. But by 1997, when I first met him, his television career, along with his steeplejacking, was in decline. There were not many chimneys left to restore or to demolish, and as the work began to dry up, the broadcasters started to feel that they had gone as far as they could with Fred Dibnah. But the one thing television needs more than anything else is presenters with passion, enthusiasm, and personality, and when it came to industrial history and engineering, it was clear that Fred Dibnah had it all. So, although up to this time he'd only ever been the subject of documentaries, I put a proposal to the BBC for an industrial history series with Fred as presenter. Fred Dibnah's Industrial Age was commissioned in 1998, and from that moment on, Fred had a new career. But Fred was unique, unlike any other television presenter before or since. As David Robson wrote in the Sunday Telegraph, his genius lies in cutting through the stiltedness of so much documentary television and speaking to the viewer in simple colloquial English. There is a whole world separating the glitz of the television studios from everyday life. Very few programmes have bridged that gap, have been able to illuminate ordinary lives in the way that Fred Dibnah does. Fred was from Bolton, Lancashire, and he was proud of it. And it was Bolton that provided his inspiration. Growing up there in the 1940s and 1950s, he fell in love with the decaying industrial landscape around him, and he developed the interests that were to stay with him for the rest of his life: steeplejacking and steam engines. He saw beauty in the mills and the chimneys and the engine houses, and especially in the great steam engines inside them. It was in these early years that Fred first became interested in climbing chimneys. Steeplejacking wasn't his first job. Fred served his apprenticeship as a joiner.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?